Retro Now.
Hey, this is Lauren Mary Kim, and I'm the stunt double for Ahsoka Tano in Clone Wars and the armorer in The Mandalorian. You're listening to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. This is the way.
Welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And we're going to wrap up this week with a look at some semi-recent Star Wars news, and I'll explain what that means here in just a second. But before I do, Jay, I want to go ahead and remind everybody where we can be found on social media.
Oh, of course, Dennis. We are on Facebook and Instagram very conveniently at Podcast Stardust.
All right. The digital line, the signal's boosted to maximum output. The shield is down. We are now broadcasting to the galaxy. So last week when we did our news episode, it was originally going to be a very different episode than what we ended up putting out. But then we got the news of the teaser for Maul Shadow Lord. And so we spent 40 minutes talking about that. And that was plenty for 1 week of news. And so I decided
Time
to
well spent, though. Yes.
Yeah, it was a great conversation. We had a great time talking about that. It was a lot of fun.
Oh,
But I wanted to get back into some of the stuff that we were going to talk about last week, and it's going to keep. But essentially, it's some of the continued fallout from the reorganization at Lucasfilm, where Kathleen Kennedy is stepping down and being replaced by Dave Filoni and Brennan. And she did an interview with Deadline. And so they kind of picked her brain on a whole lot of topics. So we're going to talk a little bit about what she had to say, and then a little bit about some of the things she said in passing about the various Star Wars movies that are in development. In some cases, what she didn't say.
Mm-hmm.
But did you get a chance to read that article, Jay? What did you think?
I did. And it was a very long article, but I thought they did such a great job with really diving into a lot of the nitty gritty of, as it says, it's like an exit interview almost, and I really appreciated a lot of the things that Kathleen Kennedy said. And I did gain a few new insights from the interview, and I feel a lot of closure from this interview. So I think that it was great, and I'm eager to unpack it with you. But what do you think?
No, I thought it was enlightening, and I was surprised by a few things, and then left thinking, oh, that makes a whole lot of sense in some cases as well, because part of it just hadn't thought about it before. But I mean, let's be honest, there's been wild rumors about her stepping down from this role for a couple of years now, and she's 72, so we all knew this wasn't going to happen forever. I'm sorry, I should be more clear. She wasn't going to act in that role forever, but at any rate, the time is now. And so she's stepping down. And one of the things that we talked about 2 weeks ago when we did the news and we first discussed this, that she was stepping down, it was like, okay, so Dave Filoni and Brennan are stepping into this role. And I was a little surprised at the time, because I would have thought that whoever the new CEO coming in would have had the opportunity to name the new president of Lucasfilm. But as it turns out, this is something that's been in the works for 2 years.
Yeah.
And she kind of handpicked her successors in Dave Filoni, and I keep calling her Lynwen. It's Lynwen Brennan, and I apologize for that. And she basically picked them as a pair because of their respective strengths. Lynwen on the business side and Dave on the creative side. And she kind of broke Dave in on making movies all the way back with Rogue One. So when she says that they started this 2 years ago, she had some idea of potentially putting Dave in a position to do this all the way back in like 2014, because, that's when they were starting to produce Rogue One.
Exactly. And, and it does, everyone's so happy, I think, as collectively as Star Wars fans, to see Dave as one half of the whole when it comes to the succession of Lucasfilm. But it's nice to know that this has been in the works for so long, which there's a lot of things like this that happen in Hollywood and in creative projects, not just Lucasfilm, but different types of studios and whatever. There's so many things that happen behind the scenes that we as fans don't see. It's just the cogs of the wheel. It's the
Mm.
same thing, with when you drive a car, you only see what you deal with. You don't see what's going on under the hood necessarily, but everything's working. And so, yeah, so I really appreciated knowing that this was something that had been coming for a very, very long time.
Right. And then the other part of that was that she made sure that Dave was working with Jon Favreau on things like The Mandalorian so that he could get that mentoring from
Mhm.
someone who's made numerous movies and been very successful in that role. And so, as much as he contributed to the success of the things like The Mandalorian, it really was a learning opportunity for him from someone who's been there, done that. And I thought that was pretty special too, for
Oh,
her
for sure.
to take Dave under her wing like that and get that mentoring, get that expertise and make it available to him so that he could grow into this role and eventually take it over.
Yes. And, and like we were talking about with Lynwen Brennan as well, that's another person that we didn't really realize that was so influential and so behind the scenes. But, it hits me too that that's how Kathleen Kennedy was for a very, very long time. There's so many people that don't realize how far back her credits go and
Mhm.
all of the things that she had her hands in, a lot of these franchises like Jurassic Park and Indiana Jones and Back to the Future, all of those things. And she just wasn't at the forefront of all of it. And it's great to know that Linwin is in kind of in that same vein. As I was reading this article too, I thought to myself, gosh, I wonder if Pablo Hidalgo was ever part of the equation. I thought about like, oh, Star Wars is very famous for its trilogies and the big three kind of thing.
Yeah.
Could Pablo have been, part of that creative, leadership sort of thing? But then I realized, well, I mean, yes, but he's influential in a very specific lane
You
of
nailed it.
Lucasfilm. You know what I
Right.
mean?
No,
Yeah.
you absolutely nailed it right there. There's there was a big misconception years ago that when George Lucas stepped down and Pablo's face started showing up all over the place, whether it was doing in those Rebels segments that they would do on StarWars.com or whatever, that he somehow replaced George Lucas, which was never the case.
Right.
He is basically he's a very influential figure, no doubt. He is a lore keeper. He is a lore master for Star Wars. He is
Mhm.
a resource. He's part of the story group. He's part of the editorial board that they have that makes sure that if something shows up in this comic, it's not contradicted in this other book and the
Yes.
like. And he is
Yes.
a resource for the movie makers and for the television crews and stuff like that. I know he's gotten to show up on sets, but he doesn't make movies. He doesn't make television shows.
Mhm.
He is part of the team, but that's not his job. He's not a director. He's not had the role like Dave Filoni has as a supervising director. And none of that's any disrespect to Pablo, but that's never been him as far as I know. And
Mhm.
so no, but I'm with you. I think he'll be at Lucasfilm as long as he wants to because he knows more about Star Wars. He's forgotten more about Star Wars than we've ever known.
It's so
And
true.
so uh
Yep.
it's just he just knows that much stuff. He's that much of an expert on all of it. So um
Exactly.
one of the things I wanted to touch on a bit is like, they made a point that, just because she's stepping down from Lucasfilm doesn't mean that Kathleen Kennedy is completely leaving the company and that she's likely going to be working on a whole lot of Star Wars movies going forward. She's got that relationship with Dave Filoni. She's producing The Mandalorian Grogu. She's producing Starfighter. She's potentially going to be producing additional Star Wars movies, but she's also looking forward to working on projects with her husband, Frank Marshall, who
Yeah.
is a very famous director for Jurassic Park and all kinds of stuff in his own right there. And it sounds like she's really at peace with all of this. And it kind of seems like she's kind of like done her time. She
Right.
was the torchbearer for Lucasfilm for so long. And now it's like, take that weight off of her shoulders and let her go out and play. Just focus on the producing side of it. she produced all these movies that have come out since 2015 anyway, but she also was running the studio and all the day-to-day stuff and figuring out what was going on with the publishing division and all those things. But now she just gets to work on a movie at a time. And it kind of seems like it's a relief for her.
Yes, and she did say that in so many words, and that when you're in the role that she used to be in, that you're always looking forward to that, like, what's coming next and how do we manage this, as you were mentioning. But she said you're in it in the moment with that. And she did have a sense of peace and closure, I think, with a lot of that. And it's just nice to know that, Kathleen is still going to be Kathleen no matter what. And I got to hand it to her. She's had such a tough skin throughout this whole thing. And I think the thing about it is that nobody really knew, kind of like what I was saying with Lynwen Brennan, when she was working on all of these other projects, she was just kind of unseen. But
Right.
when things went sideways, she was the only name that people had in their mouths. You know what I mean? So it was kind of like, yeah, this is who we're going to point the fingers at. And she did take it in stride. I mean, she did a lot of that with just grace and poise. And she even mentioned, the bots can affect things, which of course they can, the
Mm-hmm.
whole social media thing and whatnot. But that was another thing that really just impressed me, was that she was very reflective, but yet looked forward to the future with, a lot of high hope and excitement. And like you said, she's 72, but she's still really loving it. And she even mentioned that too, about how she felt so lucky that she's been able to make a living doing all of these things, which I thought that was amazing.
Yeah. I respect her for still working that hard at that age, because
Yeah.
my hope is at that point I've been long retired and I'm not working hard on anything. But at any rate, at least
But
not
when
to
you
make a
when
living.
you love it, not to
Sure.
have to make a living, I guess is
Well,
the
some
big part.
people can't be happy unless they're busy, which that's
Yes.
fine. That's a personality.
Yes.
It's not necessarily
Mhm.
mine, but you kind of talked about some of the things she was reflecting on, and she was asked about that, and she mentioned that one of the things that was one of the highs is how passionate Star Wars fans. The opposing low is that there is a very vocal minority out there that really just wants the same thing over and over again, and there's just no pleasing them. And
Right.
she's basically pointed out that when she got into this role and Bob Iger talked to her, he said, be bold. And she said, I've always liked that because I think you have to be bold and you have to be willing to take risks with people and with ideas. Otherwise, you're just doing the same thing. Right now, we're in an era where companies are so risk averse, and I get it. I hear all the conversations. They've got Wall Street to please, and I get it. But I also believe that's what contributes to things disappearing. Ultimately, I just think you have to take those chances. And yeah, I mean, she's been in a very tough place. The direction there with Disney changed. It was, we've bought Lucasfilm, we want more Star Wars movies, and now we're launching Disney Plus. We want content from our streaming service. Oh, that content's not driving subscription. We want more movies. And
Right.
so it's just been her juggling a lot of stuff over time, and she's handled it with grace. The flip side of that is, she was asked about regrets, and she basically said, well, she had a little bit of regret about Soul the Star Wars story, and she had brought Larry Kasdan in on it, and they were so excited about the idea, but then they realized that fundamentally, conceptually, you cannot replace Han Solo, at least not right in that moment, because Harrison Ford is just so iconic in that role.
Right.
And then
Sure.
she went on to kind of smooth things over. She said, as wonderful as Alden Ehrenreich was, and he was really good and is a wonderful actor, we put him in a possible situation. And once you're in it and you're committed, you've got to carry on. I think I have a bit of a regret about that, but not about the movie making and filmmaking. I don't have regrets about that. I just think that conceptually we did it too soon. And I think there's something to that. I think it was trying to tell that movie at that time when we talked about this just a couple of weeks ago, with things being sandwiched between the Avengers movie and Black Panther and stuff like that. It just was in an overcrowded field.
Mhm. Mhm. And she mentions that too. And the fact of the matter is too, she understands that creative responsibility lies with a lot of different factors. And, it's corporate decisions, and then it's also creative strategy and that type of thing. And of course, hindsight's always 2020.
Right.
So, she just had to do what she can do at the time, and she's right. I mean, Alden Ehrenreich had big shoes to fill too. I mean, that's a big ask.
Indeed. So while she was doing this interview, she had an opportunity to touch on a number of other projects, and she was asked about them directly. And so I wanted to go through a couple of these. There's a couple of things that she did not mention at all that we'll get to once we've kind of run through everything else. But anyway, let's kind of start off the top. Number one, the Starfighter movie. And she said that this has been designed as a real standalone and is not intended as a series, but it could happen. And
Mhm.
she was really gushing praise on Flynn Gray. So I
Yes.
guess this kid from Northern Ireland, I think. And reading between the lines, it seemed to me like she was suggesting there's potential for additional movies featuring him and whatever character he's playing. How did
Mhm.
you read that?
Yes, that's exactly what I read, and you're right. I mean, gushing over him is definitely a good way to put it, and I just think she had a lot of professional reverence, not only for him as a young actor, but she even mentioned his parents, which I thought was really cool, because a lot of these child actors, their parents come along with them for the ride and, as part of the team, and she was just really impressed with that whole package. And so yeah, she really did kind of hint at the idea of having more movies, or at least stories that will be made with him in the future. So that's huge.
All right. Wild speculation moment.
Yeah.
She did
Yeah.
not mention Ryan Gosling in that
No.
same breath.
She did not.
I don't know what that means,
Mhm.
but I'm sure that'll fuel some sort of clickbait fan speculation article out there on the internet at some
Right.
point. That might
Well,
be mean,
I mean,
but I mean,
there's
I picked up on as well. So
yeah, but there's also, I mean, there's been plenty of one and done kind of characters, but that being said, the main character of a movie such as this, for that to happen, but I mean, heck, there's so much that could happen. Ryan Gosling is so hot in Hollywood, right now, and he's got a lot of irons in the fire, so who knows where it'll go in the future.
indeed. So Dawn of the Jedi, which of course is the shorthand way of referring to the movie that Jim Mangold was going to direct with a script by Bill Willimon. So they had completed a script and apparently turned it in, but she described it as something that was breaking the mold and it is currently on hold. And at this point, it's not really her decision, especially since she has one foot out the door.
Mhm.
Um, so that seems fairly straightforward, but do you have any particular interpretation of it?
Not really. I mean, that's again, like you just said, it's very straightforward, and I don't think that there's a whole lot more we can say about that. I mean, other than the fact that it's on hold. Those 3 words right there say it all.
My take on it is this, is that we know that the Star Wars and Lucasfilm and Disney have gone through a number of script writers for various projects. Just thinking about the new Jedi Order, which we'll talk to about at the end of this alone. This guy had what, 4 different script writers at this point, lead script
Mhm.
writers. And that in itself is not necessarily a bad thing. You usually get a first draft by someone in the studio's like, okay, this is pretty good, but I want this other guy to take a look at it because you don't have any more time to spend on it, or you're just not quite getting it there. But they've gone through a bunch of scripts and then, something doesn't get made or whatever happens. And again, the new Jedi Order thing is being the key example. With Dawn of the Jedi, I guess the point I'm trying to make is that Kathleen Kennedy had a look, had a type, had a feel that she was looking for in Star Wars, and I think she was always trying to hold up a George Lucasian version of Star Wars. And I'm just can't help but wonder if what Willimon turned. Now remember, he did work on Andor, right? That
Right.
it was just too far afield of what they wanted for a Star Wars movie, and therefore they had to put the brakes on it. Speculation on my part, but you know, when she comes out and says they broke the mold, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair to say, and breaking the mold can definitely backfire for Star Wars as well, as we've seen in the past. I mean, there's thinking outside the box, but then there's also thinking too far out of the box, and I love that Lucasian term that you threw in there. That was great. But
Thanks.
we've seen that from, the Game of Thrones producers, and that
Right.
was the kibosh was put on that big time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and then their Star Wars project died on the vine. So
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
yeah. So we'll see what happens with that. Sounds like something's been done, but it's currently on hold. But again, these things do have a way of resurrecting themselves at some point. The Lando movie. Okay, this thing's been all over the place,
Mhm.
and she flat out said she didn't say much other than Donald Glover had turned in a script, which surprised me. I didn't realize they'd gotten anything close to that. But that thing has been a Disney Plus series or a movie or Disney Plus series, and now apparently it's a movie again with Disney and Lucasfilm. And so they got so far as to complete a script and turned it in. And so I'm guessing it just really wasn't what they wanted.
Yeah.
Or she's just really learned not to say a whole lot about it because, they get in
Yes.
trouble when they talk about the stages of development and nothing ever happens.
Exactly, but it's good to know that it still has a pulse, thanks to Donald Glover. The thing about this movie, though, is the way that I see it is it's not really essential to the current Filoni era that we're getting into. You know what I
Sure.
mean?
Yeah.
And it doesn't anchor a new era or resolve an existing one. So it's kind of in this weird, like I said, limbo phase, so to speak. I think it would do really well as a series, but I can see why the movie aspect of it is so attractive as well. So I still hold out hope. I would love to
Yeah.
see it, but I don't know how confident I am.
Right. I think one of the things that's got going against it is that it would essentially be building on what happened in Solo: Star Wars Story, which is the lowest box office total we've had, adjusted for inflation, yada
Mhm.
yada yada, for a Star Wars movie, is one. And two, like you said, it's it's not really building on anything else that's going on right now. It's not advancing the timeline. It's not even it's not even in that same group of movies that's the Filoni verse, as you were suggesting. But the reason to make this movie is it's starring Donald Glover, and he can get really hot at times with
Mhm.
with his
Mhm.
popularity. So I don't know. I'm curious to see what, if anything, happens with that.
Yeah.
Up next, she talked a little bit about The Hunt for Ben Solo, which kind of surprised me. And she
Yeah.
said, as you have read, Steve Soderbergh and Adam Driver turned in a script written by Scott Burns. It was just great. Anything's a possibility if somebody's willing to take a risk.
That's
So,
big.
I mean, this movie was described as dead, and that's why Adam Driver and Soderbergh were talking about it. But she's suggesting that maybe they're, and read between the lines or whatever you want, that maybe the door's not closed on that one.
Mhm. Oh, I totally agree with that, and I think that it's gonna just take the right key to open that door,
Uh-huh.
and it's gonna need I mean, obviously, the script has been said to be exceptional, so I actually have pretty good hope for this one if it's done correctly. I think the I don't wanna say the problem, but I think that the where you have to be careful with this one is the fact that not only does it need a strong script, but I think it also needs to explore ideas and a storyline that is also going to be equally strong. But Adam Driver seems to be obviously 100% on board with this, which I think is just amazing that he
Mhm.
is so ready to revive the character of Ben Solo and resolve some of these stories or at least explore them.
They need to try and get him to show up at Celebration next
Oh my
year
gosh, yes,
and get
please.
the fan reaction to that, and then they can, Lucasfilm can show that to Disney and say,
Yep,
see how
yep,
excited people were about this."
exactly. Well,
And,
that's how we brought back the Clone Wars, right? Right,
yeah, exactly.
right?
All right. Next on her list of mentions was the Rian Johnson trilogy. And she went on to say, once he made the Netflix deal and went off to start doing the Knives Out films, that has occupied a huge amount of his time. That's the other thing that happens here. After Sean and I started talking about Star Wars, Stranger Things kicks in, and he was completely consumed for a while by that. That's when what happened with Ryan. And then I do believe he got spooked by the online negativity, which he says he was not. But I think Ryan made one of the best Star Wars movies. He's a brilliant filmmaker, and he got spooked. This is the rough part. When people come into the space, I have every filmmaker and actor say to me, what's going to happen? They're a little scared. Um, I don't know if that's the
Mm.
case or not. I really, Rian Johnson says he loves Star Wars. He loves the passion of Star Wars fans, but I think my take on it is he's just got consumed with his own property in this
Yeah.
situation. And, why get into something that some other IP that somebody else's owns, and when you don't have the creative control over it, when you're doing something else that you love, it's so well received and you get to keep making the choices.
Right. Well, as you mentioned earlier, and what Kathleen Kennedy had said is that people really do have to set aside their lives for years to
Yeah,
make a
35
Star
years.
Wars movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the focus on that is intense. And she mentioned in another part of the article, too, that of course, every filmmaker wants to work on Star Wars. Everybody's got their personal stories and their memories and everything like that. And it's just a part of our collective conscience, that Star Wars just exists in this amazing way. But I think that that's probably where it boils down to, as you mentioned with that, is that he's got his other projects, he's got his other focus. And I don't know so much as that he got spooked necessarily, as he realized what kind of focus and tunnel vision basically he was going to need to have if he's going to do this justice.
Right. Yeah, I think your take is right on that one. It's a huge time commitment, and if you're going to do 3 movies, then you're really talking about 9-10 years in order to get
Right.
them all done. So
Hmm.
yeah, that
Hmm.
that is huge. Okay, so she kind of talked about the trilogy that Simon Kinberg is working on and what Taika Waititi is doing on at the same time. And so I'm going to combine the discussion here. She said of Simon Kinberg's trilogy, he's working right now. He wrote something that we read in August and it was very good, but not there. We've pretty much upended the story and then spent a great deal of time on the treatment, which he finished literally about 4 weeks ago. And it's a very detailed treatment, like 70 pages. And so he's expected to give us something in March. Huge development there. And
Yeah.
then she went on to say about Taika Waititi, I think the ones by Taika and Donald Glover are alive. That's going to really be up to the new team to figure out. Dave, I know that Dave and Lynwen are very much on board with what Simon's doing, and that would be a new trilogy. In the timeline of things, that takes you well into the 2030 plus. So that's really what's up next. So
Wow.
yeah, I mean, we've got
Hmm.
we got Mandalorian Grogu this year. We've got Starfighter next year. There's potential sequels to Mandalorian Grogu depending on how it does in the theaters. And then if this trilogy happens, you're figuring it's once the first one comes out, you'll probably get a sequel every 2 to 3 years after that. And
Right.
so there's not a whole lot. If they're only going to do one Star Wars movie a year, which I kind of suspect is going to be the max we're going to get, there's only so many more movies that we can get at any time
Hmm.
in this
Hmm.
case. So I I don't know. It's Taika recently, and I didn't put this in the notes, commented after this
Yes.
saying that, he was really leaning into the classic adventure for his, which
Uh-huh.
I thought was fun. Sounds like perfect. But precious little beyond that for that
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah, and I'm giggling because Taika is such a hype gremlin in the best way, you know what I mean? Because I know
Uh-huh.
exactly what post you're talking about. I saw it on Instagram as well. And, if there's I've used the term quite often of the whack-a-mole of Star Wars movies, but I mean, Taika's movies like the Schrodinger's Tuca cat of Star Wars movies.
Right.
It's like, is it gonna be funny? Is it gonna be this or is it gonna be that? And I guess it is unless you think it's otherwise. And so it's I don't know. His project in and of itself, I mean, Taika's gonna Taika. You know what I mean? It's just, oh gosh. I
Yeah.
giggle every time I think of him.
Yeah. I mean, of all of these, and there's two notable exceptions we haven't talked about yet because they were not brought up in this interview. Of all these movies, as far as I'm concerned, we know Starfighter is happening, but I
Mhm.
feel like the Kinberg trilogy is the most likely to happen beyond that.
Yes,
I
I
am not as
agree.
confident in the rest of this stuff.
Right, right. And I will say, and we've said it in the past before too, that with Taika Waititi's movie, that could go again, the Schrodinger's Tuca cat is the best way I can put it. That could
Right.
go really sideways if they're not careful, because of course we know his brand of humor, if well placed, is awesome, but when it doesn't hit, it really doesn't hit.
See Thor Ragnarok versus Thor Love and Thunder.
Yes.
So
Yes.
definitely, definitely. I agree. I mean, next goal wins. by Taika Waititi. I think that's the most recent project I've seen by him. Love that movie. Have you ever had a chance to see it?
No, I haven't. I need to put that on my watch list.
Yeah, carve out an hour and a half. I think it's only about an hour and a half long. It's fun, heartfelt. It's just fantastic movie about America's Samoa soccer team and their return from the depths of nothing. But really, really fun movie, and he can invest a lot of heart in a movie. He just has that gift of doing it, and so I'd love to see him pull off a Star Wars movie. But as much as I like Ragnarok, I was lit down by Love and Thunder. And that's not what I want to see happen with him in a Star Wars project. I mean, I like what he did with his work on The Mandalorian. He contributed, as a director to some episodes on that. So,
Right.
He can do it, but I just want to, yeah, you're right. Be careful is what's left out there.
Yes.
Okay. The last two movies that were omitted from this discussion. First was the new Jedi Order movie. So Daisy Ridley's movie where she's supposed to return as Jedi Master Rey Skywalker. Nothing was said about that. But in response to that, Daisy's always working on projects. She's very busy as an actress. And she was recently asked about it by USA Today. And she says that all of this changeover with Lucasfilm does not have any impact on the new Jedi Order movie. And she's recently also said it'll be ready when it's ready. And she appreciates everyone's excited and passionate about it. But, there's only so much she can say. And you can paraphrase the rest of her comments that are that she's not expecting any updates to come on this movie this year. So if there's going to be announcements or there's anything going to be happened, we should expect it in 2027 at the earliest. But I don't know. What's your take?
As much as we would love to see this movie come to fruition, I think that, and maybe an announcement at Celebration next year in 2027 is probably the better timing for this. But I also appreciate
as long as they're ready to go.
Yes, exactly. But
Yeah.
I do appreciate what she said about, that it doesn't really have an impact on her, the changing of the guard kind of thing. And
Yeah.
I thought, I can appreciate that because as a former teacher, it didn't matter if you had a different principal in your building from the principal that you had before, you still, whatever you were working on at the time is still going to happen, or it's still going to, if it's intended to happen or if it's going to happen, it's going to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So.
I'm kind of wondering if it's, and maybe this is what's happening, I just don't know it, but it seems like they've had a lot of scriptwriters come in and try and tell the same story, and none of them are getting it right in this situation. So maybe just work her into the Kinberg trilogy. I mean, there's some rumors out there that she's going to appear in it the way it is, or just drop everything that's come before, have somebody else come in and pitch a whole new story for Rey and start with that, because it just seems like they're get rid of the entire creative team behind this project and come up with something new, because it's just whatever is going on, it's just not working.
Well, and didn't Daisy say that she actually helped write some of the script as well? Didn't we talk about that?
I don't recall that. I mean, last I heard is that she was expecting to see something, months ago, but I don't think she's actually been working on the script itself.
Maybe it wasn't the script. Maybe it was just some creative ideas. I swear I remember something
possible.
like that.
Yeah. Okay. And then the other one that's noticeably missing is the Heir to the Empire movie that Dave Filoni was supposed to be doing. And this is something that's kind of occurred to me. Is he going to have time to direct a movie when he is the president of Lucasfilm? Or if this movie is going ahead, is he going to have to find somebody else to lead it? I mean, that could be Jon Favreau for all we know. But there's also rumors, and they're, take them with a big grain of salt, that this might get reworked into a Disney Plus series, because it essentially was going to be the culmination of a whole bunch of other Disney Plus series.
I like that idea, quite honestly. And I thought the exact same thing when you said that it could be kind of, the baton handed off to Jon Favreau for this movie. But I do think that it would work well as a Disney Plus series. Who knows?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's the genesis behind this whole thing, was the Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett, Ahsoka, and all these other series. One of the articles I read was like, characters from Skeleton Crew. I was like, I don't know how the characters from Skeleton Crew would contribute to that story, but people smarter than me could figure that out, but I just don't know how. I mean, I think you'd have to leave those kids out of it. They're kids. They're not
Mhm.
soldiers.
Mhm.
And
They
that type
are
of
growing
movies.
up. Who knows? By the time that Kim's out, they could be, in their 20s by then.
Yeah, but would you really be contributing then the essence of Skeleton Crew to this
Sure.
series? Which I don't. I think the
Mhm.
answer is no. Is a
Mhm.
resounding no. It would be something completely different.
Mhm.
I think you would need something to bridge the gap from Skeleton Crew to there if you're going to do that,
Yes.
which
Yes.
seems highly unlikely.
Yeah, because it's unlike something like Stranger Things where you followed these kids and watched them grow up with the story as opposed to, taking them completely out of the original Skeleton Crew and then propelling them however many years into the future.
Indeed. All right. Well, so that's what we've got from the Fallout. One other recent note I'll make real quick with regards to Starfighter is that the writer Jonathan Trooper had a recent interview with Screen Rant, and he made sure to point out that there's going to be no legacy characters in Starfighter, not in cameo appearances or anything like that. And the quote he said, the quote reads, "Obviously, lightsabers are part of that universe and part of that galaxy. I'm so careful not to reveal anything, but essentially, I think it's known that we have no legacy characters. You're not going to see any of the characters you've seen in the other movies. So there are certain things that are still hallmarks of Star Wars that it's good to have in there. But more than that, I can't say." You got any feelings on that?
Well, I'm wondering what his definition is of a quote unquote legacy character. Is that just a character that, we've seen obviously it's a character we've seen in the movies, but I mean what kind of specific definition is he attaching to that?
Well, I think it comes in the very next sentence, which is as you're not going to see any of the characters you've seen in the other movies.
Not any at
So,
all. Okay.
yeah, I mean, I agree. If he just left it at legacy characters, then you're like, well, is that prequel and original trilogy, or
Mhm.
does that mean sequel trilogy? But when he comes out and says you're not going to see any of the characters
Any.
you've seen in other movies, then to me that he is shutting the door on the
Right.
sequel trilogy as well. I
Mhm.
mean, that
Mhm.
doesn't mean we won't see stormtroopers because they're a hallmark of Star Wars movies and the like. But I think if you're looking for a specific character that could still be kicking around 5 years after the Rise of Skywalker,
Mhm.
don't expect them to show up in this movie.
Mhm. I'm okay with that, I'll be honest. It's always nice to have those, as we have called them in the past, comfort characters, thrown in there, but I don't like them thrown in just for the sake of throwing them in. I mean, give them a reason, a purpose, something for the story itself, but just to do it is just kind of an empty victory. So I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think back to Rogue One. R2D2 and C3PO show up, and right as they're getting ready to go off to Scarif, and then of course we see Chopper rolling
Travis.
around in the background, and we get Harrison Dula announced over the comms in the background, stuff like that. Those worked, but it was also a very strong movie, and it wasn't like these were characters showing up to save the day or something like
Mhm.
that. I mean, it is a oh haha, and then you move on,
Right.
and that would have been fine. I don't know if there's any legacy character outside of 3PO and R2D2 or BB-8 that you could really pull that off with in this without them having some sort of an impact on the story.
Mhm, and we don't even know what the story is, so, I mean, there's
Right.
no really way for us to know where they could potentially be, so.
hmm Okay. Well, this has gone long. One last story I want to briefly touch on is something that you and I have been kind of following with interest, and that is simply that over in Disneyland, where they are converting part of Galaxy's Edge to an original trilogy timeline, they have closed Oga's Cantina for refurbishment. That happened on January 20th, and it is expected to last for about 6 weeks. So we knew that there was going to be some alterations happening there that would impact availability of some of the attractions, but it looks like Oga's Cantina is the first one of those.
Yeah, so getting a big old facelift.
Yeah, yeah. I'm curious to see what they actually end up doing. I know that's where we can expect to run into Han and Leia quite a bit, but
Mhm.
I don't know what all you actually need to do. It's a grungy cantina. I don't know that it was. Are you going to make it pristine or what's? Well, we'll let that.
We'll see.
We'll figure it out. Okay. Well then, that'll do it for this week's news. Thank you for joining us here on this episode of Podcast Stardust. We hope you've enjoyed the episode, and if you have, please consider subscribing to the podcast if you haven't done so already. We're available pretty much on all the podcatchers. I know podcasts are suddenly available on Netflix. I don't think we qualify because we don't do video.
Really?
But
Okay.
yeah, they sent an email about that the other day, and I was like, well, I'll see if Libsyn, who is our host, ends up saying anything about it. But I don't think you're going to find us there. I think they are primarily promoting their own podcasts, and it's in those that are in a video format. So anyway, just throwing that out there, something to keep your eye on in the future. We'd also appreciate your ratings and reviews wherever it is that you do listen to your podcast, and we are available. And then you can head over to retrozapp.com where you'll find the back catalog of the show, including all previous 992 episodes and several other great shows that are on the network. So that out of the way, Jay, you want to go ahead and remind everybody what our social media contacts are one more time and where else we can be found online?
Yes. Well, where you can find us easily is Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust. And you can also check out our plethora of Pinterest boards and our YouTube channels. So we have the traditional YouTube as well as YouTube Music, also no video, but you can download those, subscribe, share those out. And those also do support interactions too. So let us know what your comments are about this news episode or any other. And we'd love it if you drop us a line at podcaststardust@gmail.com. Send us your questions. We are very rapidly approaching our 1000th episode. And also be on the lookout on Instagram for some fun templates that you can interact with as well. But send us those questions at podcaststardust@gmail.com. And then you can also pick up some Podcast Stardust swag at TeePublic. And the link to that is in our show notes. We have 7 different show logo designs to pick from, so you can sport all of the Podcast Stardust swag out in the galaxy. And if you do, please snap a picture and post it and tag us so that we can see where those end up out in the wild.
All right, Jay, remind everybody what's going on in the world of cosplay.
Sure. So we just had Ahsoka Tano Day on the 29th of January, celebrating 18 years of Ahsoka Tano. And so you can check out my post over on my Instagram, which is at j.snipscosplay, as well as everything else that I'm up to with Ahsoka, Heir, the Fourth Sister, my original concept Mandalorian, and much, much more.
All right. Upcoming on the show on Monday, we are picking up with the next episode of the Clone Wars as we continue with our rewatch. I believe that is episode 8 from season 3. And then on Wednesday, we are kicking off the book club that we've been talking about. And so we'll be reading the classic Legends novel by Drew Karpyshyn, Darth Bane, Path of Destruction. And we'll be covering the prologue plus chapters 1 through 3. So it's about 32 pages in my copy and the Kindle edition of the book. And you can, of course, find it on Audible as well if you prefer audiobooks. So make sure you check it out and come back for the discussion in a week's time. So with that, thanks for listening to episode 993 of Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a fantastic weekend. Stay safe. And until next time, may the Force be with you.